Necro is looking like the AoE king of update 50. The single target is super strong, but the cleave is the reason Crow is going to take over a lot of the meta. Blastbones, Corpseburster, Boneyard, Siphon, Pummeling Goliath all stacked together into a build that can do big boss damage while deleting everything in the room. And I want to frame this honestly, I'm not a Crow main. I missed the old Crow meta, I was on a break. So this is my first real time learning the class and learning the double bash weave, learning the little intricacies of how Necro skills work or sometimes don't work. So my best Goliath bash parse right now is 177k, and that's definitely not the ceiling for the build, but it shows the setup is strong while I'm learning it. And the cleave is even crazier. I did a Velothi cleave test that was honestly a little silly. Stack dummies, everything sitting still, not a perfect raid scenario, but it shows the point. With Velothi, the surrounding dummies were taking basically the same damage as my main target. Around 150k to 7 dummies stacked is crazy. That's why I'm calling this the AoE king. I'm showing 3 setups in this video. Huntsman for single target with and without Goliath bash, Velothi for cleave, and Signet for the easiest version. The Huntsman and Velothi setups both use Pummeling Goliath double bash weaving, and I'll get into that. The Signet setup is easier, no bash weaving, no alt window, but it's less damage, but it's still super strong. For race, I'm a Khajiit, but I recommend Dark Elf or Khajiit. Khajiit's a little better for 4-man content, and Dark Elf a little better for 12-man. For Mundus, use the Thief. For attribute points, all 64 into Stamina. For CP, I'm using Exploiter, Mastered Arms, Biting Aura, and Wraithful Strikes. I'm using this right now because I'm a Khajiit. On the dummy, Backstabber might be a little better if you're a Dark Elf. For food, on the dummy, use Hearty Garlic Corn Chowder, max stam food. In content, use Braised Rabbit with Spring Vegetable, max health, max stam. If you're struggling with sustain, you can use Arteum Takeaway Broth, but I don't think it's necessary with this at all. For potions, you can use Heroism Potions, but keep in mind that you cannot gain ultimate while you're in Goliath form, so using heroism pots on the Goliath can sometimes be a loss, so you could just use Essence of Weapon Power. The first setup is the Huntsman single target setup. Use this when you're focused on one single boss and there's not much important things to cleave. Huntsman War Mask makes the enemy that you bash take 15% more damage from you, but you deal 50% less damage to everything else. So this is single target version. However, on some of my like 170k parses, I was still doing 80 to 90k cleave damage. So this still even cleaves more than most classes, even while wearing Huntsman. The gear is Huntsman War Mask, Perfected Null Arca on the body, and Corpseburster on the front bar. You don't technically have to have Corpseburster on the front bar. You could have it on the body. You're really only utilizing the 5-piece with Detonating Siphon and Avid Boneyard, so that's why I have it just on front bar, so it frees up the other set to be on the body. So you can still get Null Arca procs while you're on your back bar. Then Perfected Maelstrom Greatsword on the back bar, and a 1-piece crit monster set that can be Slime Craw, Ice Heart, the Blind, anything like that. For the traits on the body, I got all divines. The armor is all medium. For traits on the jewelry, all bloodthirsty. Traits on the daggers, Nirnhone and charged. On the back bar, infused with a weapon damage enchant. And then front bar is fire weapon, poison weapon. All stam glyphs on the body. All weapon damage enchants on the jewelry. I want to talk a little bit about Corpseburster. It's doing a ton for Necro. I think it's basically carrying this class right now. When you consume a corpse, the corpse explodes and deals disease damage to enemies within 5 meters. It also applies diseased and minor breach. It does more damage for each Gravelord ability slotted. And like I said, your main corpse consuming skills are Detonating Siphon and Avid Boneyard. That's why I'm front barring it. The 2 class passives matter a lot here. The first is Cycle Unending. This is basically part of Necro's Execute. You get more damage as the target gets lower, and it caps at 25%. That works really well with Bloodthirsty Jewelry, so at the end of fights, Necros just starts hitting really hard. The other one is Nothing Wasted. This upgrades corpse consumption and gives you stacks that increase your max health and weapon and spell damage. That's part of why your health gets so high even in parse food. For the skills on the front bar, I'm using Ghostly Embrace or Venom Skull. This is really your flex spot. Ghostly Embrace is better if the boss has a big hitbox or is against a wall because there's 3 AoEs that can hit. So if all 3 of those can hit a boss and some of the bosses have big enough hitboxes for it, then it's better than Venom Skull. Also, if you stack it against a wall, all 3 hit in the same spot, so it does that on the dummy. But if your enemy is too small to get hit by all 3, then definitely use Venom Skull. And then with Venom Skull, there's a little bit of nuance to it. Every 3rd cast of this ability does 50% increased damage. You never really want to cast this unless you're getting that 50% more damage. When you cast Necro skills while in battle, you get stacks of it, and it stacks up to 3 times, and then you can throw it for 50% more damage. However, if you're at 2 stacks, that's basically the same as being at 3 because it counts itself as a Necro skill. So when you cast it at 2 stacks, it refreshes because that's actually a fully buffed skull. Then Blighted Blastbones is the most important skill in the rotation. It's delayed damage. You basically pull a skeleton out of the ground and then then that skeleton runs at the enemy and it explodes, so that takes a little bit of time. The basic idea is to Blastbones every third cast. So Blastbones, Siphon, dot, Blastbones, Siphon, dot, something like that. Keep that rhythm going. And then detonating Siphon is one of your main Corpseburster triggers. If the skill on your bar is lit up, that means there's a corpse available. I'll show you. I'll get a corpse out there. It lit up, so there's a corpse available to explode. If it's not lit up, then you don't have a corpse available. We're not really worried about the dot on Siphon. We can refresh that anytime we get a corpse because the Corpseburster damage is so good. You want to be hitting detonating Siphon as much as possible when it's lit up. There is an exception though with Avid Boneyard. This does 30% more damage if it consumes a corpse on cast. So if you have a corpse available, you can cast Boneyard and it does 30% more damage. You just need to be watching your corpses, and if Blastbones is lit up, you can throw down Boneyard for 30% more damage. Then Shattering Banner is on both bars. It increases your AoE damage. I have it for multi-target, class flourish, and heroism. And then Flawless Dawnbreaker is on the front bar for the Fighter's Guild weapon damage passive. On the back bar, I got Stampede that goes along with your Maelstrom Greatsword that helps you do 12% more direct damage. Barred Trap gives you minor force and is a strong single target damage by itself. Skeletal Archer gives you major brutality and sorcery. It ramps up its own damage and creates a corpse when it expires. Refreshing the Archer early does not leave a corpse, so you got to make sure the timer runs all the way out, and it's ramping up damage, so I kind of think about it like Hurricane from Sorcerers. Don't recast this early. And then Camo Hunter, which gives minor berserk and gives some Fighter Guilds passives, but you could also slot Carve here. If you want a shield and another dot, that would actually be more damage, but this simplifies the rotation just a touch. Then Pummeling Goliath is where the sweaty version of this takes another jump. While you're in Goliath, your bashes do AoE damage, and the damage is huge. But you're not just standing there spamming bash. You want to fit as many bashes into your normal rotation as you can. So the rotation for that is light attack, skill, bash, bash, light attack, skill, bash, bash, light attack, skill, bash, bash. That is the double bash weave. It's tricky, especially on controller. I remap bash to the down arrow on my controller. That helped a lot. If you're trying to do this with both triggers on a controller, it's rough. I don't think console players are going to be able to do this. However, you could skip the bash weaving completely and slot Shooting Star, and this still does great damage. Setup 2 is Velothi for cleave. It's the same core build, Null Arca, Corpsebuster, Maelstrom 2H, just Velothi switched for Huntsman. So Corpsebuster helmet switched with the Corpsebuster necklace, and then Velothi on, Huntsman off. This was when I think the Crow gets just crazy. I did a cleave test with Velothi, and again, it was kind of a silly test. Stacked dummies, perfect conditions, everything standing still, but it shows the point. The surrounding dummies were taking basically the same exact damage as the main target. Around 150k to all 7 dummies individually. That doesn't mean every raid fight is going to look like that, but it does show why this class is scary when targets are stacked. Velothi did get a nerf in this upcoming update, but on Necro, it's still extremely good for AoE and cleave because so much of your damage hits everything. I did one test where I put a second dummy next to my main target, just one, and even with the Huntsman cleave penalty, the second dummy was still taking over 50% of my main target's damage. And then finally, for the easiest setup for all of this is putting on the Shattered Path Signet, which buffs your status effects damage, and when you have over 170 ultimate, your light attacks apply a random status effect. This just does a ton of damage. So if you don't want a double bash weave, you could use the Shooting Star setup, or you can use this Signet one. This isn't the highest damage version of this Crow setup, but it's much easier. There's no bash weaving. You actually can't ult because then you lose your Signet buff. I hit around 171k with this setup. It's basically exactly the same, just don't ult and don't bash weave. You double bar Dawnbreaker instead. Then for the rotation priority, I kind of mentioned it already, but think about it like this. You do Blastbones and then Siphon, dot, repeat. So that means Blastbone is always your first priority and then detonating Siphon second. So your priorities go like this. Blastbones first, detonating Siphon second, buffed Boneyard third, Stampede next, then Barb Trap, then Archer. Then if you have nothing else to do, you can use Ghostly Embrace or Venom Skull. If all your dots are up, you just do Blastbones, Siphon, Siphon, Blastbones, Siphon, Siphon until something needs to be refreshed. And if Siphon's not available, use Ghostly Embrace or Skull. Remember, only cast Boneyard when there's a corpse available. You want the bonus damage. One just warning with this is that especially in Goliath form, your health can get super high. That's good most of the time, but there are some cases where it causes issues, like the Frozen Tombs in Sunspire. You're not going to want to send a Necro in Goliath form into that. Also, be extra careful bash weaving with some mechanics. If a boss has a bashable mechanic that DDs aren't supposed to bash, be careful. Don't just mindlessly double bash. For instance, Basai. Now I'm going to show you my current Goliath bash parse. This is with Huntsman single target setup. My best so far is 177. Again, I'm not a Crow main, and this is my first real time learning the double bash version, so this is not the ceiling for the build at all. But I do think it's useful to show. I almost didn't put this up just because it's not close to the ceiling of damage, but I decided what the heck, might as well share it. And the Signet version was around 171k for me, and so Goliath version is already starting to pull ahead a little bit. The rest of the damage is going to come from getting those double bashes clearer and getting in and out of Goliath form better. That's really what I'm struggling with right now, is getting out of that first Goliath form. That is the update 50 Necro setup. Huntsman's for single target, Velothi for cleave, Signet for just an easier rotation. Necro's going to be crazy strong this next update. The single target is basically on par with Nightblade and Necro, but the cleave is the real reason why this is going to be everywhere. If you want the highest ceiling, learn the Goliath double bash version, but this is where I'd start if you're playing Necro in update 50. Thanks so much for watching. Peace.